What's up, everyone? Welcome back. Patrick here. Moving on to the next example in the Unit 1 Advanced Functions test. So this one is going to be dealing with inverses. And what's happening is we are given this function here, f of x equals 2 bracket x minus 1 all over 3. And we have to find the value of this expression, f of 4 minus f of inverse 4 all over f of 1 minus f of inverse 1. Okay, so different ways that you can do this, especially finding these two inverse values. I'm going to show you two different ways you can do it. And then f of 4, f of 1, I mean, these are pretty simple. So let's actually start off with those first. So f of 4, you would plug in 4 for x. So 4 minus 1, that is 3. The 3's actually cancel out. You're just left with a 2, like that. And then f of 1, if I plug in 1, well, we'll have 1 minus 1, which is actually just 0, times 2 is 0, 0 divided by 3 is 0. Okay, so f of 4 is 2, f of 1 is 0. Now what we have to find is these inverse values. And there's two ways you can go about it, probably even more than two, but I will show you two. So one way to do it is you can find what is the actual equation of the inverse going to be. So how do we do that? Well, if you remember, what happens is we got y equals 2 bracket x minus 1 over 3. That's the original function. You interchange the x and the y values like that. And then you isolate for the new y value. And then once it's isolated, that's going to be the inverse. So to isolate here, I'm going to cross multiply. So 1 times 2 bracket y minus 1 is equal to 3x, like that. And then a couple of things you could do here. You could distribute the 2 inside the bracket, or you could just bring it over right away. I think I'm just going to bring it over right away. So we'd have y minus 1 equals 3 over 2x. Bring the negative 1 over, so we have y equals 3 over 2x plus 1, like that. Okay, so the inverse function of this function that was given is basically 3 over 2x plus 1. And by the way, this is the same as like 3x plus 2 over 2. I just split up the fraction into two separate expressions. So if you did distribute the 2 inside and then brought over the negative 2 and then divided the whole thing by 2, you'd end up with this, right? This and this, they're both the exact same thing. Okay, so that's the inverse right there. So now what we do, well, since we have the inverse function, well, we could just find, well, what's the inverse going to be at this value of 4. So we would just plug in 4 for x for the inverse function that we just got. So this would be what? 6 plus 1, which is 7. So f of inverse 4 is 7, and then f of inverse 1 is going to be what? 3 over 2 times 1 plus 1, and that's going to give us 5 over 2, like that. So it's going to be minus 5 over 2. All right, so to get these inverse values, that's one way to do it. Now, another way you can do it, if you don't want to go through the entire algebraic process of finding the actual inverse function. Now, some questions you're going to have to, they'll ask that in like a part A, part B type of deal, and then they'll ask you to do something like this maybe at the end in a part C. But if you don't want to go through that, remember that if you have a function, right, and it contains the values x and y, let's actually label it different. So let's label it as m and n, right? So let's say that's a coordinate on the function. Well, what's the corresponding coordinate going to be on the inverse? Well, you just inverse these. It's going to be n and m. So if they're asking for f of inverse 4, that's what they're asking for. Well, what you could do is you could reverse this And it's basically like them asking you to solve for the x value on the function given a y value for it. So here, this is like given an x value on the inverse, which is the same as having the function have that corresponding y value. So then you could just plug in 4 for the y value of the original function, and then solve for that x value, right? So from here, you could cross multiply 12 equals 2 bracket x minus 1. Divide both sides by 2, you get 6. And then you get 7. Same exact thing that we got before, right? So if you don't want to go through the whole process of finding the inverse function, then plugging in 4, you can recognize that plugging in 4 for x in the inverse is the same thing as plugging in 4 for y of the original function, and then solving for x. So that's another way you can go about it. And then same thing with the 1, right? So instead of having like a, you know what, I'm just going to erase all this here. Get some room. So instead of plugging in 1 into the inverse, solving for the y of the inverse, you could plug in 1 for the y of the function and solve for the x value of the function. So if we do that, 1 equals 2 bracket x minus 1 all over 3. Well, cross multiply 3 equals 2 bracket x minus 1, which is basically 3 over 2 equals x minus 1. Bring the negative 1 over. So x would be 3 over 2 plus 1, which is 5 over 2. Exactly what we got before. Okay, so whichever way you do it, those are the inverse values. And then from here, it's just doing algebra. So negative 5 divided by negative 5 over 2, which is like negative 5 over 1, divided by this fraction, which is like multiplying it by the reciprocal, 2 over negative 5. Negative 5's cancel out. We're just left with a 2. Right, so that ends up being the final answer for this question. And that's a wrap for the video. Hopefully you enjoyed that. If you want to see more videos like this, please go to my website, allthingsmathematics.com. Over there, all of the videos are organized by chapter, by section. If you feel like you need tutoring at any point, you could also hit me up. My contact details are on the website. Enjoy your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.